Welcome to an episode of Behind the Scenes, a weekly program unveiling the biggest political developments in Somali politics and the wider Horn of Africa region. I'm Sultan Mohammed, your host and co-producer here on Horfeda Media alongside Suleiman Hashi. On this week's program, we shall be looking at the ongoing severe droughts which has ravaged the 18 regions of Somalia. What has been the response of the newly elected Somali federal government, and how has the international community reacted thus far? I shall also be discussing some of the causes of this drought, including climate change and increased deforestation, which has dismantled Somalia's rich ecosystems. This is the topic on the program today. We hope you find this program very informative. Please like, share, and for similar content, do subscribe to Horfeda Media. Also, do subscribe to Horfeda Media Group's second channel, known as Horfeda TV, where you can find exclusive programs such as Mahahe Salah, among others. And last but not least, do follow myself, Sultan Mohammed, Suleiman Hashi, Yasin Abdi, and the wider Horfeda Media team on our social media platforms that should appear on the screen any moment. Let's get straight into it. According to experts, Somalia is experiencing its worst drought crisis in a decade, with millions of Somalis going hungry and being forced from their homes in search of food and water across other parts of the country. We've seen dozens of IDP camps prop up across southern and central Somalia, including Somalia's capital Mogadishu, as more families flee the countryside. The drought kicked in during a difficult period for Somalia. Political instability, coupled with the impact of COVID-19 pandemic, has made Somalia's situation all the more dire. Even before the current drought, an estimated 7.7 million Somalis were in need of humanitarian assistance and protection this year, up 30% in 1 year, according to Save the Children Somalia, an international charity. As the waters evaporate due to the sizzling heat of the sun, so have the hopes of hundreds of thousands of traditional, nomadic and farming communities in Somalia, with the crop harvest being wiped out and livestock dying due to the lack of water and pasture. For such people, this is the only means to survive in a country with limited job prospects and opportunities. To give a more numerical analysis of the data, let's take a look at recent assessments of the country. The international charity Save the Children Somalia conducted an assessment of 12,000 Somalis from 15 out of 18 regions across the country and found an estimate 70% of households do not have enough food to eat per day. Nearly an estimate 700,000 camels, goats, sheep and cattle died from drought-related causes over the last 2 months. Now, Somalia has experienced three major drought crises in the past decade. This is 2012 to 2011, 2016 to 2017, and now 2021 to 2022. In the 2011-2012 drought crisis, 3.7 million people were experiencing crisis levels of food insecurity, according to the UN. A slow global response to the early warnings of the famine led to at least 260,000 people, half of them under the age of 6, dying from hunger and related conditions across the Horn of Africa, including Somalia. By the end of the crisis, only 56% of the UN funding appeal set up to meet the staggering needs in Somalia had been met by donors. In 2016-2017, the drought crisis was a little bit different. Now, over 2.6 million people faced the crisis to emergency level food insecurity, according to the UN. However, the difference here was a faster, more substantive global response led to lives being saved. And by the end of this crisis, 68% of the new UN funding appeal had been met by the donors. Now, this year, the latest food security projections show that an estimated 4.6 million Somalis face crisis to emergency level food insecurity from February to May 2022. This was according to the UN figures at the time. Now, critically, only 2.3% of the current UN appeal to response to the crisis has been met by donors. At least $1.5 billion is needed to protect vulnerable children and families across Somalia and give them the food, healthcare, education, and water they need to get through this crisis. There have been 4 seasons of failed rains and temperatures remain unbearably high. Now that's 90% of the country being dry, according to UN estimates. So what are some of the reasons, aside from instability, a lack of funds, a lack of government, as to why droughts continue to reoccur in Somalia? The first one is climate change. Now, climate change has played a significant role in making droughts in the Horn of Africa more intense and rain less predictable. In fact, the Earth's temperature has already risen by 1.1 degrees Celsius, and unfortunately, Somalia is listed as one of the most vulnerable countries in the world to this change in climate. It is predicted that Somalia's temperature will increase by 3 degrees Celsius by the end of this century. Now, to understand this changing climate, one has to understand the increased level of emissions from developed countries, mainly from Western countries and China, which has obviously happened due to the industrial revolutions that have occurred in these countries and are occurring in other developing countries such as India or Brazil, among others. However, rarely has this resulted in an increased sense of responsibility or support for countries grappling with the effects of this very industrialization elsewhere in the globe, such as Somalia, such as Bangladesh, among other countries. Now, let's take an example, the UK. The UK has a population of just over 4 times that of Somalia, but it produces 520 times the emission, according to World Bank figures. However, the brunt of the effects of those emissions are faced by Somalis, or might be faced by any other country in the world which is directly affected by this climate change. So surely the question becomes, shouldn't the countries that are emitting the most levels of chemicals or carbon dioxide or whatever else is causing climate change share the brunt of the costs of dealing with the effects of it? Now, according to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, an average of more than 20 million people a year are displaced by extreme weather events, and this has been since 2008. And Somalia is no different, as we've recently seen the newly elected President Hassan Sheikh Mahmoud visit IDP camps across southwest states, including Baydhabo, the transitional capital of southwest state of Somalia. Now, the second reason is deforestation. The UN Convention to Combat Desertification, known as UNCDD, says an estimate 8.2 million trees were cut down for charcoal in Somalia between 2011 and 2017, increasing land degradation, food insecurity, and of course vulnerability to droughts. And we've seen this in 2017 and 16, there's a major drought, and currently we're going through it at the moment. Now, the UN Security Council Resolution 2036, adopted in 2012, banned the export of charcoal from Somalia, and President Hassan Sheikh Mahmoud, during his first term upon election, one of the first things he did was ban the charcoal trade in Somalia, obviously in relation to the UN Security Council 2036 resolution. Nevertheless, still large amounts of charcoal are illegally produced in southern and central Somalia to be exported to Gulf states, particularly the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Oman, among other countries, according to UN reports. We all remember the recent Emirati ship that departed from Somalia illegally to Oman, where it was detained. The ship, known as MV Fox, was reported to have been carrying 4,425 MT of charcoal in the form of 25 kilogram bags. The ship, originally from the United Arab Emirates, is reported to have left the Jubaland region of Somalia. Nearly 2 million trees are cut every year in trade, worth $120 million, according to the UN. The UN also names, as I said previously, other countries, including Bahrain, as the key purchasers of this illicit coal. Of this 120 million, at least 10 million is siphoned off by Al-Shabaab. A large sum also is taken by rogue soldiers under the banner of AMISOM initially, and under the KDF banner that oversees security in Kismayo, and this can be done through bribery, and some of the coal has been transported to Kenya itself, according to UN reports. According to a multitude of reports released by various international organizations, the KDF heavily benefits from this illegal coal and sugar trade that takes place in Kismayo. In a report by researcher Ben Rowlands for Journalists for Justice, it demonstrated the peak of the illegal trade in 2015. Now, he found that KDF levied $2 tax on every bag of sugar and charcoal. He also found that the illegal trade bringing in around tens of millions of dollars per year for parties involved, and Rowlands went so far as to say that the actions of the KDF directly benefited Al-Shabaab financially. Now, why is he saying this? He's saying this because to allow the coal trade to continue means that Al-Shabaab can take more taxes from the ports in Kismayo. They can take more taxes from individuals transporting the coal from certain parts of Somalia that are obviously free and going through Al-Shabaab territory. These kind of things allow Al-Shabaab to make tons and tons of money on top of the trade that's going on. So if KDF and other, and I'm not saying the whole of the KDF might be involved in this, there's obviously rogue elements of the KDF, right? There's rogue elements in the Somali National Army, there's rogue elements in Jubaland Authority, there's rogue elements everywhere in Africa. And if these rogue elements continue to do so, then what they're doing is directly benefiting Al-Shabaab. Now, this lucrative business is at the expense of Somalia's nomadic and farming population, as the cutting of trees directly results in desertification and a loss of biodiversity and ecosystems that are quite necessary for life to continue in terms of wildlife. So what has Hassan Sheikh Mahmoud's government done thus far? Well, last month, President Hassan Sheikh Mahmoud appointed MP and former 2022 presidential candidate Abdurrahman Abdushakur as Villa Somalia's Special Envoy for Droughts. Now, alongside the president, the special envoy visited southwest state Somalia and Galmudug to see the effects of the drought firsthand, as well as assessing the immediate aid and support required for the victims on the ground. Now, this is a good thing because it's important for politicians and individuals working on droughts to see how droughts are working on the ground and what are the immediate needs of the people, and to hear the pain and the anguish these people are feeling. This, of course, will leave an image to anybody's mind on, affecting their mind and how they might process what's going on. And the special envoy has also made appeals to the international community to increase financial support for the Somali government as it struggles to tackle the worst drought Somalia has faced in a decade. Now, the United Arab Emirates recently donated $9.6 million, which was initially confiscated by the Farmajo administration due to the illegality of transport to Somalia. It failed to follow both international and national financial regulations and rules. However, behind the scenes cannot confirm whether this money has been used for the drought relief at this current time, and we hope that it will be done. Aside from the appointment of a special envoy, President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud has also pledged to build a national initiative to find short-term and long-term resolutions to the recurring droughts in Somalia. Now, what next for Somalia and this continuous recurring dreadful crisis? Now, I just want to tell everybody that the drought crisis will not disappear overnight. Climate change, coupled with the lack of effective government, the lack of funding, and the continued desertification, means that droughts will only get worse over the next few years. While neighboring countries are equally experiencing the effects of this drought, Somalia remains the only country suffering such large-scale devastation, famine, death, and displacement. And this is directly due to the inability of the federal government of Somalia to exercise its power in relieving victims and providing the necessary support needed. And of course, there's many reasons for this. This is because, of course, Somalia has been without government for 30 years. Somalia doesn't have the security capabilities at the moment. It's currently facing a militant insurgency. It doesn't have the financial support at the moment, and obviously we just came out of a political unstable situation, and we're trying to recover from that and build a new government. Now, for Somalia to overcome this recurring issue, it must, number one, develop a coherent plan to find immediate and long-term causes and solutions of the drought. First, identify what's causing it, what direct actions are causing it. Once those are identified, then we can introduce measures to first limit those causes and eventually eradicate those causes. Number two, developing effective government in both state and federal level. It's important to develop effective government because, yes, there might be an effective government in Mogadishu, but the finances, the governance is trickled down all the way to the state and local level. And if governance is ineffective on that level, then how the implementation of federal government policy will be implemented on a local level will be very difficult to see. Thirdly, it must tackle insecurity and instability, because insecurity and instability means that donors, NGOs, supporters, even government workers will be worried to be traveling to certain parts of Somalia because Al-Shabaab or another terrorist group or a militia group or a clan militia or whatever other group there could be is being a security hindrance. We've seen this happen in the 90s when General ID was using his militia to inhibit trade and UN support being used for Somali people. And we don't want to see such things happening again in Somalia. And last but not least, tackling rampant local level corruption. Because the thing is that the federal government might not be corrupt. This is a hypothetical situation, because of course the federal government has corrupt elements to it. But in a hypothetical situation where the federal government was completely clean of corruption, which is every Somali's dream, if that was the case, if the money was then passed down to the state level, which was also clean, but then passed down to the local level, which was corrupt, then it's going to be a hindrance of finances of those donors reaching the intended populations. So it's important that we have a re-education program on how governance works on a local level, the connection between the people and the local government, to understand and to tackle levels of corruption and ineffective governance, which is of course in itself a major hindrance to Somalia's recovery from the drought.